I think a lot of people let outside perception and outside things really determine not only what they want, but who they are. And when you do this for so long, it gets really hard to not only discover yourself, but to discover people, because now, you're only able to learn people as deep as you know yourself. And I feel like time and time again, you struggle with that. When you haven't given yourself enough time, when you've been loving other people too much and not loving yourself, you kind of realize that you've been pouring so much that you don't have anything left in your cup. You haven't loved yourself enough to understand who you are and what you want. And you have to stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself. And I think that feeling of selfishness is something that we have to understand is important. We have to be selfish in that sense to feel okay, not to overshadow how other people feel, but to feel comfortable when we are looking for relationships, when we are having our own things. Stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself. When you want to have relationships, when you want to have these connections and what you feel comes about, that is important as well. You are valued what other people think and how other people feel so much that you water down your own feelings. When you keep doing that, you don't get to actually discover who you are. You don't get to have the things that you want because you want everyone else to feel okay. And this is one of the struggles of being a people pleaser. You have to be okay disappointing other people. And when you're living so much to get these people to agree with you, to get these people to validate you, you have to realize you're no longer living for yourself, but you're living for them. You're living for this image of you, that they have in their head. And when they are trying to have these relationships, trying to have these connections, you're going to say yes time and time again just to feel that they're okay. How you feel is important too. And when you value other people so much, you kind of lose sight of that. You don't realize that you're not being selfish for saying how you feel. You're not being selfish for choosing, who you want and who you don't want in your life. It's your life. You have to be okay with that. You have to be okay that making this decision won't deteriorate from anything, but it helps you find yourself more. It helps you feel more comfortable in your own things. And I think when a lot of people are trying to do this, trying to find this, they can definitely get lost in that translation. The difference between being selfish and choosing yourself. And I think we have to practice choosing ourselves more because of the things that happen in our life. When we're talking about getting hurt from people, even then we choose to go back to these people. We choose to let these people have, this level of power or attention over us because we don't know how to feel. We don't know how we should be feeling. And that's what makes it so much easier to let it deteriorate from you, to let it take away from you. You don't have to understand why these people hurt you. And I feel like a lot of times the people that hurt you are the people that stay on your mind the most. They get to have the biggest effect on your emotion, and you're realizing that's damaging you. You shouldn't let them have that. You shouldn't let them, keep coming back or doing whatever. The people that hurt us the most stay on our mind the longest because we can't accept what they have already done. We can't grow, we can't move, and we feel like we are going to be stuck on this person forever. And when we keep telling ourselves, that's how it's going to feel. You have to understand that the people that have taken the most away from you emotionally, you don't owe them anything. You don't have to be in emotional debt to these people. You don't have to be dependent on how they made you feel or what they did. How they treated you isn't you. This isn't who you are. That's not, a now defining term for you, but it's something that they did. This shows how they feel about themselves or how they are unable to appreciate you. And you have to be strong enough to move on. You have to accept that what this person did isn't something that has to hurt you anymore. That's what healing means. It means realizing that these things don't have to control you. They don't set this parameter on you. They don't set this limit, but it's something that you are able to break out of and move comfortably with. If you're moving in a certain way because of how this person feels, you have to realize that now you aren't moving for yourself anymore. You aren't living, you aren't doing these things for yourself because you're still hurt on that thing that's happened in the past. And I feel like when you are hurting, when you are still stuck on that, it only gets harder to have, future relationships. And I say that because when you choose yourself, when you start to do that, and really try to grow, try to have something deeper than yourself. When you know what you want, when you feel so confident and so ready to have this relationship, I feel like choosing yourself is showing humility. And a lot of people might not understand that, but I think knowing what's best for you means being able to have relationships and admitting when you make mistakes, admitting when you are in the wrong, admitting when you aren't doing the best for this person. You have to be comfortable enough for that. Not a lot of people are when it comes to relationships and building actual things. A lot of people want relationships, but no one wants to change. No one wants to admit they're wrong, or admit that they make mistakes, or that they can't have this or that. Your partner is going to change you, and that's what a relationship is going to do. That's the whole point. You are supposed to build on each other so that way you get better. This person isn't supposed to force you to be someone you're not. It should be compatibility. You have to realize that with that vulnerability in a relationship also comes sacrifice, also comes improvement. And when you're trying to build something, you have to experience that. Instead of staying the same, you have to realize that if you get with someone who, agrees with you and is you on every certain level, that's not someone you need. There's no need to have two of you. You have to have this dynamic. You have to have this change. You have to be able to grow. You have to have these relationships that not only, help you and support you, but propel you into the person that you are supposed to be. That is what you're looking for. This soulmate isn't something you find, but it's something you create. And when you start to choose yourself more and you start to realize that you can experience this humility, finding a relationship and being okay with how these people treat you gets you a lot further instead of feeling sad for yourself time and time again. When you are stuck and dwelling on that, it's only going to get harder to have relationships now. And I think so many people have gotten stuck on that, or caught on this past feeling that we kind of lose sight of what we want, and losing sight of that becomes so many different other things because we aren't really sure what we want, what you want. And that takes time. You have to realize that finding yourself also means creating yourself, also means editing yourself and curating, what certain aspects you need to feel the most you. That's what you need. And a lot of people are scared of that part of things, that uncertainty, that not knowing, what they're going to be like in the future, or how this person is going to treat them. That's the whole point. You have to just be comfortable choosing yourself before letting people choose who you are. And I think over time, the more you're able to do this, to practice this, and to understand that what you want has value, and that you get to determine your own value. That's another thing. Your own perception. Your perception shapes your reality. If you have this idea that you're unlovable, or that people aren't, going to look out for you, or aren't going to do this best thing, you have to realize that that's something that's going to happen now. It's going to be so much easier to see something negative. The same way if you go out the house and only want to see red cars, it's going to be so much easier to notice red cars because you tell yourself this. You're going to miss out on all the other things, all the other wonders that are out in reality, because you are stuck in this negative, pessimistic mindset. If you want to feel better, that means you have to stop building a home out of that sadness. And I think a lot of times when I mean choosing yourself, it also means living for yourself, living comfortably, living, knowing that you don't have to live in that pit of sadness and rumination all the time. That deep pensive feeling you have all the time isn't you. Your emotions aren't you. You're able to change from that. And I think a lot of people forget that they don't have to let it, connect to them. They don't have to let it be them, but it can rather be, something that they observe, something that they are able to learn and to grow on, time and time again. And I think people forget that. People are so scared of their actual relations, or the things that they feel, and they don't want to face that, so they drown themselves with other things, with temporary relationships, with people who might not care about them but might give it to them for a little bit, or whatever that thing may be. We're so scared of facing who we are and looking in the mirror that I think that's what's happening a lot. That's a lot of people's actual reality, is they're so scared of being alone that they have to be with people time and time again. They have to always be with someone, always talk to someone, always be texting someone. And you get to see that solitude is important, because you get to not only analyze yourself, but analyze your emotions. Your emotions are something you have to let control you. I feel like, it's okay to detach from your emotions in order to observe them. You have to realize that these things don't have to, control you, but it's rather something that you are able to understand. You're able to understand how you feel and see these things, and to know that it doesn't have to be a determining factor. You have to practice this emotional independence a lot of times, and I feel like when we're kind of letting people, get into our life, or do these things, and whatever they do now makes us, feel a certain way, that's not resilience. And it makes sense to have feelings. It makes sense to feel like, what this person did hurt you. And I think everyone's experienced this level of hurt, but we can practice moving on and feeling okay instead of diving down each time again. It's the over analyzing. It's the, oh, what could I have done better? Or what should I have done? It's not always you. You're not the problem in a lot of this. You have to realize that. And that's not in an egotistical sense or that sense that you make, no harm or that you do no problems. But it's realistic to understand that when people hurt you, it's not your issue. That's not something that's based on you. That's not something that you have to fix or you have to learn. You immediately look at what I did, what could I have done, or what should I have done, when really that only makes it so much harder. You keep asking yourself these questions of what you could have done when you realize that that person is the one who made the mistake. They decided to treat you this way. And when people are telling you, they didn't intend to hurt you, you have to understand what did they exactly intend to do? What were they looking to do with this decision, with this idea? People are fully aware of how they are making you feel when they go out of their way and do these things. And when you want to have a relationship, when you want to feel comfortable enough to be open with someone, to have someone pour into you while you're pouring into them, it gets so much harder to accept that. It gets so much harder to practice that resilience, but we have to learn. We have to be able to understand that we are able to learn this stuff, able to move on, able to do all these things because we want better for ourselves. That makes sense. We want to feel better. We want better for ourselves. And time again, we don't know where to start. And it starts with choosing yourself. It starts with focusing on yourself. It starts with looking in the mirror and understanding everything that goes into who you are. The emotions, the flaws, the pros, the cons, the things that your past, your future, who you think you are now, even in the present. All these things add up to who you want to be. And I think the best part about this is once you imagine that person who you want to be, your dream version of yourself, the perfect version, as soon as you start acting like you're already that person, you've become them. You are that person now. And I think a lot of people forget that they are able to change their future day after day. It's really just the simulation of a bunch of good choices in a row. You make enough good choices and you'll be set for life. And that's how it works. There's no need to overdo it or to feel a certain way. Start feeling more comfortable with yourself. Start realizing that you have a voice too in this world. You get to say how you feel. You get to do what you want. And that matters. People don't want to hear that. People don't want to accept it, or they might feel like, well, I'm not anything special. No, we are significant in that way. You are able to learn from yourself and learn from these things. And I feel like that growth is something that we have to feel more comfortable with. Feel ready to live in and to accept when we want to feel better, when we want to have that thing. You are exactly, the very thing that determines your future. And as soon as you realize that, as soon as you start to make that change, the easier it's going to be. You are able to grow. As soon as you realize how precious, life is in all these moments, choosing yourself will become the easiest thing in the world. And you have to value that. You're not living for anyone. You're not living to be understood, but you're living for yourself.